Welcome back to The Short Game. This is a show where we talk about short video games, the kind of thing you can pick up and complete in an evening or a weekend, things that respect your time, the kind of games that can try things that bigger games just can't dare to try. I'm your host, Reagan Kelly, and I am joined this week, of course, as usual, by my bro host, Shane. How are you doing, Shane?
I am super.
And Laura Nash. How are you doing, Laura?
I'm doing fantastic.
And this week we're talking about a game that, it's a bit of an older game, a game that's kind of been on our list for a very long time, but it's gotten bumped up recently because it was recently part of the free games for the month for PlayStation Plus members, and that is Limbo from Playdead Games.
Yeah, it's not that often that I have the inclination or a chance to go back and play these sorts of games again. We are always moving from game to game, so it was kind of nice to have that game just sort of dropped in my lap and brought back to my attention. And I really got a chance to realize what made me like it so much the first time I played it. It's one that's always been on my mind.
This is a really good throwback, month for me between this and Spider. Going back to games that I tried, maybe didn't complete. I completed Spider, but I didn't complete Limbo the first time. And just, jumping back in, Limbo is such a well-balanced, I would call it a platformer, but it's a puzzle game more like, keep going right, solve the problem you need to do to continue going right. But it's been wonderful to kind of jump back in that world and wander around this spooky place.
Ooh. The word spooky is all over our notes for this episode. I think probably every fourth word is spooky.
Is this our Halloween special?
It
Do we
is.
need to delay this?
We'll have to put it off. Well,
I know it's wonderfully morbid and like the Victorian cutout, like Edward Gorey sort of way. The art style's, much simpler than that. This has the opposite problem of Machinaria. It's not a problem, but at Machinaria we had so much stuff on screen. Here there's very little on screen. If it's there, you use it. And it kind of makes this eerie atmosphere.
It is incredibly stripped down. The visuals are, even more than 5 years after this game came out, which is weird, right? Like, it's been a long time. I kept feeling like this game was just, I'll get around to this eventually, right? I'd never played it until now. And apparently I'd been putting it off for a full half a decade.
I played it when it first came out on the PlayStation 3, which I don't think was the very original release, but it was definitely way back there.
Right. It first came out on Xbox Live Arcade, and I actually think, maybe I'm getting my timeline mixed up, but I think it was a part of the Summer of Arcade. There was a certain period in the history of the Xbox 360 that I largely missed out on by not having one, that was a really big time for indie games. And this was right on the cusp of when, the indie game, avalanche started hitting the world of consoles. They had started becoming a pretty big deal on PC already by this point. A lot of developers who had been creating these smaller, more compact experiences were moving from web games and things like that into this space of creating more full-fledged experience for PCs. But full-fledged games, indie games as downloads on consoles was almost still kind of a novel idea at this point.
This is that Summer of Arcade is the same time that Indie Game the Movie was shooting. I always feel like that happened in 2012 because that's when that movie came out. But I remember that I had an Xbox and I had a job doing casual games. And so the indie game boom was huge for me because I was learning so many new mechanics that I could take bits and pieces of and use them when I was designing. It's 5 years ago, but I remember that just being a huge puzzle game explosion. Scapegoat, actually, the first one came out that year too.
Yeah, this would have been among the first downloadable console games that I played because the PlayStation Network kind of kicked off, I think, in around 2006 or 7. And I don't remember. I had a PlayStation 3 at around that time, but there just weren't that many games that were like, buy it and play it right now. It was more like, you can connect your store-bought game to play online with friends or something, which never worked. So, it was pretty original for me at the time. And of that, the games in that era, this one is one of the ones that stuck with me. I think the reason it stuck with me is the art style, really. And that's pretty much, in my mind, the biggest defining factor to the game is the appearance. There still isn't anything that really looks like it. Going back to that art style, I can't remember any other game that has this level of like stripped down appearance and gameplay, like all together. It's an extremely minimal game.
A nice quote that I saw online from Arndt Jensen, who's one of the two creators of this game, was, "I really enjoy getting rid of everything to see what works. It should be working when it's very naked and there's nothing, no music or anything. I really enjoy the moment where you can be sucked into this world with just a small amount of sound or a hidden detail in the corner." I think that's really interesting that this really is a completely stripped down experience. No color on screen whatsoever. It's entirely black and white. There's almost no detail. So you see, maybe slight details in the outlines of objects, but most objects can be essentially stripped down to rectangles, squares, circles, simple shapes. The enemies in the game are mostly just the environment and what other creatures you see. They're all really simple to the point of being almost unidentifiable. And also, this applies to the story as well. The game has a story that is so stripped down as to be something that you can really sort of project your own impressions onto. There's no hard and fast, right and wrong answer about what the game is actually about, what the action of the game is depicting. It's all very minimal. And yet, it really gives you this sort of screen to project your thoughts and your ideas onto.
I mean, I love that the game is a full screen experience. There's no heads-up display. There's no death counter in the corner. There's a lot of easy, cheap things that they could add, like hint bubbles, tutorials.
There's no Navi.
No Navi. You figure things out by dying. It has a really stellar point-by-point exploration of each puzzle, because you get to do, you do something, you pass it, then you die right after. Okay, next time to do this instead. You figure out the ordering. A lot of the puzzles, there's a lot of humor in this game where they'll teach you one trick and then they'll reverse it. So you try to do the trick again and then you just die.
Yes, like the moment where you find you're walking along and you step on a button and something slams down and kills you. Mm-hmm. And you're like, oh, well, I guess I better jump over that button. Oh, here's another button. Better jump over that one. And something slams down and kills you anyway, because that button you have to step on.
Yeah, that's the opposite. That
button's the opposite button. And then now that they've taught you that, some little guys come and chase you and chase you back across the buttons.
But you know how to do the buttons and they don't.
Yeah. Which you've learned by dying over and over. Yeah. And that's kind of the defining part of this game to me. Like I'd like to go back and kind of compare to some of the games that were around this time. Like this was, to me, right after Braid, which I think came out the year before or a couple of years before. 2008 or 9 is my best guess on that. And Braid was my first time I played like a puzzle platformer, and I was like, oh, puzzle platformers are going to be something special. So at that point, like every puzzle platformer to me had to have a gimmick, right? So, Braid's gimmick is playing with time. And I was thinking, okay, what's the gimmick of this game? It was that sort of instant revival without any loss of progress,
Oh, it's so good.
Yeah, you die, and sometimes you die in these crazy, insane ways, like, something, or completely unpredictable ways.
Ways that in any other game would feel incredibly unfair.
So cheap.
Yeah, and yet in this game, it manages to turn those completely cheap and kind of brutal deaths into not only sort of a teachable moment, but even kind of a reward. Because every death that you have in this game. First off, you revive again from it almost exactly where you left off, and you've lost essentially no progress. But each death actually is really amusing and interesting. There's sort of ragdoll physics to this, but it's more than just ragdoll physics. When your character dies, you hear the crunch of his bones, and depending on how he's being killed, you see just tiny hints of real gore, just really gory stuff. Like, for example,
it's not tiny hints. This is a ragdoll that is full of like organs and viscera.
Yeah, and they've just done an amazing job of animating that, so it feels physics based and sort of ragdolly, and yet the animation of it is a little different each way that you die, and it's really kind of disturbing. I mean, really dark. Like, this game is bleak, but also darkly funny.
Yeah, with only flat black silhouettes. One of the first deaths you'll have in this game is falling onto spikes. Classic platformer death. 90% of the time when you see a classic platform death like this, you just fall and you die, you turn invisible.
You blink.
Or you fall and you might stay and then bounce out of life. Or you might die, stick, and a game over comes up and you've just, gotten stuck. The way Limbo does it is you land on the spikes and you hear that crunch of the spikes going through, and then the animation slides down just a little bit and you hear this like a sound of a sponge going against a wall.
And the light in your eyes goes out.
And the light in your eyes go out. And then you instantly reset. So you have this really satisfying, sick animation that's really detailed. Like, they thought a lot about what a body goes through when it dies in these many, many different ways. And it's a reward. You're going to die a lot, but you're always going to be entertained by it.
So, Shane, what you said a minute ago about there not being like the gimmick of this game being that mechanic. Well, what I think is so interesting about this is, like, you're right. So many puzzle platformers, or even platformers in general, or maybe even just indie games in general, organize themselves around this one central gimmick, one central mechanic. But this reminded me, and this is a weird thing to say because it's so very different, but it reminded me of a lot of the more modern Mario games, in that those games and this game, they have a lot of ideas, a lot of neat little mechanical, puzzly, or interesting ideas. Whether in Mario, that's things like these, new enemies that you come up against, or new types of stages that give you a new thing. And these Mario games, particularly the more modern ones, will throw those things at you once and maybe give you one more time to experience it now that you've mastered it. And then it's gone, and they're throwing something entirely new at you. It's constantly giving you these interesting new gimmicks or mechanics, and it's not ever recycling things. And that's not to say that recycling things in new ways is ever bad. Like, there's some games that I've played where they give you a central mechanic. It's like a portal gun. It's one thing, and you find dozens and dozens of ways to use that. But here, there isn't a central, iterative mechanic.
No, you're right. The controls for this game are controls that you've had before. Like, I think right around the same time, I was playing Little Big Planet. And Little Big Planet is a game with definitely a gimmick, right? It's got this whole interactive level creator that's central to the experience, but it has the exact same controls that this game does. You've got to jump and you've got to grab, and that is it. It's a platformer with jump and grab. And this game gives you those two things in a bleak hellscape, in which you're going to be destroyed over and over again. So I guess you could call it a gimmick, but it's more just like an aesthetic.
Yeah, death is really central to the
whole idea.
Morbidity and, bleakness of this game. And I think that's great. Like, this game, when it was kind of sold to me, was the game you die a lot in. And not like Super Meat Boy, where you die a lot because the game is hard. Death is part of the exploration. I love it when games tie that art style to the actual gameplay. And this feels really tight. The puzzles only give you what you need, and that helps with the sparseness. And the soundtrack also is super sparse. Like, everything is just bare bones.
Oh yeah, we haven't talked about the soundtrack yet. It's really unique. there's almost no music in this game, or at least when I thought to think about it, I thought to myself, all I'm hearing are, the whistle of the wind through these bones and things. Like it's very bleak in terms of sound.
The audio is akin to like the times that it uses actual white instead of gray. Like the few times that you have white, the eyes of the main character, there's
the creepy brain slugs.
I was like, leeches? When you have white, it's very intentional.
It's something important.
It's something important. And when there's sound, other than the atmospheric sound effects, it's usually a big reward or like a big opening. They want you to kind of have an extra immersion level. It's very, very targeted.
I don't know if there's really much to say about this game in terms of its story, but I think that's one of the strengths of this game, was that it did so little explaining. And yet, there's clearly something happening here. We start the game with a little boy sort of waking up in a field, I guess, in this very bleak landscape, all in black and white. And, I mean, like all platformers, our goal is go to the right. And we pass through a bunch of different, increasingly weird and maybe sort of nightmarish landscapes. From places where there's clearly a bunch of bodies lying around, to places that seem more inhabited, from forests to more industrial-looking areas.
I always sort of took it to be exactly what it says in the name, which is Limbo. I always thought this is the afterlife.
I suspect that's probably the case. I mean, that seems to be the implication, but it's never flat out said.
There definitely are hints of death. I mean, there's little flies following the character around. The creepy brain slug I interpreted as a maggot.
Yeah, could easily be.
But it doesn't. You don't have to have a deep meaning for this game to work.
Mm-mm.
Yeah. The ending is particularly sort of haunting, and I suppose it doesn't really feel like something that needs to be behind a spoiler break here, but I'll do my best not to give it away. I will just say that the ending is really haunting, and even still, it doesn't truly explain things. But, you really should watch to the end of the credit roll. And there's a final sort of shot once the game sort of returns to the title screen after the credit roll that kind of sealed for me, at least the context of this, dark and dismal world. And I have to say, like, it was haunting. It was kind of creepy. I had fun playing it because the deaths were so amusing, but it's also really, really bleak, really dark. And I think that's something that it does really well. Like, if you don't mind that sort of perspective, don't play this game as a pick-me-up, is what I'm saying.
Well, we're saying dark and death, but it's not like, there's plenty of violent shooters out there. Like, it's dark in the sense that it doesn't let up.
True.
You're gonna die.
It's not a gritty experience.
No, you're right. Yeah, that's absolutely right. It's not gritty. It's just sort of haunting and
spooky.
and spooky.
I mean, it's a little more like, it's not the same, but Yearwalk has elements of that.
Absolutely.
It's the absence of extras that make it scary. The only other thing that we've played here that I thought of was there is a point in Little Inferno where it has a similar aesthetic. And I won't say any more because that's,
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. Those are both really good comparisons, particularly Yearwalk, which had that sort of bleak, otherworldly weirdness to it. I didn't think about Yearwalk when I was playing it, but now that you mention it, I have to feel like that Yearwalk took some things from Limbo just in terms of its art style and sort of general tone, although it was a little more rooted in the real world than Limbo is.
Yeah, when you think about Yearwalk, I mean, the importance of the sound effect of the steps,
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that's a huge part of Limbo. Just the the emptiness of you walking alone. And you're alone in this game for most of it.
Yeah. So this game is out on basically every console ever. I mean, since 2010, when Playdead released it on Xbox Live, it's now been released on. So we're playing it on the. I played it most recently on the PlayStation 4 because that's its most recent release. But it has been released on the Xbox 360, PlayStation 3, Microsoft Windows, OS 10, Linux, Steam OS, Xbox One, PlayStation 4, PlayStation Vita, iOS, Android, OnLive, and Wii U, according to the Wikipedia page. I mean, that's insane. So it's available for basically any device that you have. And there's actually a good chance if you are a PC gamer that you probably already own this game. It's been in multiple Humble Bundles. So if for some reason you've been putting this off, it really only takes about 3 hours-ish. How long did it take you guys?
2.5 hours. I kept stopping and starting. We had a thunderstorm, so it was actually perfect. Play this in a thunderstorm if you can.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Yeah, I would say 2.5 hours is right on the money. And that brings up that this is one of the first games that I played that made me start thinking about short games. Right around the time this came out, there were, I remember there being reviews of this game that were really critical of the kind of time for money prospect of this game, which is, at the time it came out, was about a $15 game, and people were saying, gosh, this game was great, but it left me wanting so much more. And I was like, oh, I don't know. I just felt good to have something finished.
Yeah, have we moved away from that criticism much in mainstream gaming press?
We're getting there.
This game came out when the wave of, let's vomit a bunch of icons onto a map and call it an open world game thing was at its peak. Where this 2006 to, 2009 or something. I don't know. I'm putting arbitrary numbers on it, but really, people were really, really into these incredibly lengthy games that were basically just having you do the same thing over and over again, And I didn't play this game until very recently, but I could see where it would really have stuck out in the landscape of 2010.
Definitely different.
So it's been total silence from Playdead, the developers of this game, since 2010. I guess so, yeah.
Well, save for a ton of updates and new ports, but yeah, other than that, silence.
I mean, that's true. Like, they've spent the last 5 years porting this game to everything and releasing it on every possible console and platform.
Yeah, it's on everything. I actually was going out to check my my power meter on the back of my house, and suddenly I found that it had installed Limbo.
The developers, Playdead, have been teasing their new game, which is called Inside, for a little while. And actually, it's been pushed back a couple of times. It was originally announced for early 2015, but I mean, here we are in, well and truly mid-2015, and I don't think right now we have an actual release date or even an estimate. But Inside, all that's out of it right now is a trailer. I'll post a link to the trailer in the show notes. But I mean, it looks to me like they are following an interesting trajectory from Limbo. It's a platformer. It's in 3D, but it seems to be like sort of that quote-unquote 2.5D. You're controlling a character in 3D space, but moving around on a 2D plane. And again, it looks like a game that evokes more than it describes. You seem to be following a young boy running around in a sort of a dark, sort of dismal, maybe, I don't know, apocalyptic or Orwellian looking scenario. And that's really all we know about it at this point. It looks kind of cool. The artwork for it looks neat, but I don't know. We don't know much about it, and we may not for a while yet. It seems like it's been delayed a number of times. It does look like it's set to debut on the Xbox One, although I would be surprised if they didn't very quickly port it from there to every other single platform imaginable, as that seems to be these folks' MO.
I'm excited about it.
Watching the trailer now looks really interesting. Ooh, jumping, They've got jumping.
They've got jumping.
Hey.
It has all of the hallmarks of
They've got
their
swinging
game design.
There are worse taglines than "We got jumping, we got swinging."
Donkey Kong. Wait. So what have you guys been up to? I know this is a bit of a silly question to ask because, dear listeners, we were recording this one back to back, more or less, with our last episode. So, in order to catch up some lost time. So when I say, what have you been up to? Really, I'm asking, Laura, what have you been up to? You didn't record with us yesterday. Shane, I know what you've been up to.
You don't know what I've been doing.
I stumbled back into Fallen London. I've been playing it for several years. Probably since before Limbo was out. That seems like a really long time.
Wow.
I mean, I've been playing since the game was pretty small, and the game is huge now. For those who didn't listen to the interactive fiction episode, Fallen London is a huge interactive storybook about this kind of Victorian Neath. Online, free to play. You can buy extra, storylines through pay to play, but most of it's free. Little bits of social aspects, but they did a couple things that have made me kind of move from a once a week, maintainer to someone who's actually checking daily. And one of the huge things is they're moving to iOS and Android ports of the game.
That's really exciting. I had a hard time with their web interface. It was just a little too, 2005 for me. Like I found it a little bit of a barrier to entry. Also, the fact that I'm rarely at a desktop computer these days.
Yeah, and it's really, the site doesn't scale at all on mobile devices. If you try to play on your phone or tablet, it will just shrink everything down. The bad kind of not actually responsive design. And so tremendously excited, signed up as a beta tester. They're going to be doing that in waves. So I can't say anything about it, but I'm really happy to play there. They've also updated, there's ambitions where your character can choose kind of a huge goal, one of 4 storylines. And they've updated by ambition. So there's now a lot more content, hard content, like, things I actually have to work for. And I haven't had to work for things in this game since I'm pretty far along in a while. So I'm excited because it's not grinding. I'm actually doing full storylines I didn't find before. Like, I'm kind of uncovering a lot of things in a game I thought I'd completed. So
that's awesome.
That's really exciting for me.
When that comes out on iOS, I'm going to give it another try, for sure, because I think that was probably the only thing keeping me from really getting into it. A game like that where you are sort of meant to be checking in on it periodically rather than playing it in, 2 or 3 sessions of sit down and play for a few hours. That type of game, I don't think it can afford to not be mobile anymore.
Absolutely. And I think the interface they'd created on desktop was just way too much to try to do responsive design. I'm really glad they're doing native apps. And they actually have even talked about, after they finish this, if the port's successful, taking Sunless Sea, their huge game, and making a mobile companion app for that as well.
That sounds neat.
Yeah, Sunless Sea has been on my list of must-play games for a long time because you got me started on Fallen London, but I did have that sort of issue of like, well, I don't play a lot of games on my laptop, and I want to play this game on my phone. I will play it when it comes out on mobile, but I am more interested in Sunless Sea just because it combines this sort of story-driven game with what we all know is my favorite genre, roguelikes.
Yeah, I have been on like 4 or 5 unsuccessful sea voyages in Sunless Sea. I'm still having fun with it. I'm dying a lot. My poor captains have gone down with the ship, and they have eaten their crew. Everything bad has happened to them. Apparently not everything bad has happened to them. I'm finding new things. I froze to death in the last one.
Perfect.
That was fun.
It reminds me of that wonderful Josh Ritter song about the boat that gets icebound.
Well, don't keep going north if you're not a very good player at this game.
Good
and
call.
then after you think you've gone off the map, then don't continue going north and go off the map again.
I don't know. It worked for me in 80 days.
It did work for me in 80 days. Deus Ex.
It got really romantic.
Oh, You did. I didn't.
There are hot times at the North Pole.
Jester refuses to play 80 Days, and it makes me mad.
Ugh. Well, I've also been playing a game on my iPhone that I wanted to mention because it came out today. And I know when you're hearing this, dear listener, it will no longer be today, but it might be a week or so in the past. If you haven't had a chance to check it out yet, go download Pac-Man 256.
I really can't believe that it's the 256th anniversary of Pac-Man.
I can't believe this. He's 256 years old now.
Yeah.
It's by the same developers as Crossy Road, Hipster Whale. And I talked about my love for Crossy Road on our Endless Runners episode. Even though it's not strictly speaking an Endless Runner, it's still sort of an Endless-esque game. You know, it's a cross between a classic arcade mechanic, Frogger, with this more sort of Endless Runner style, and done as a free-to-play game that still really respects you in terms of not bugging you or being, basically shitty. And that really seems to be the same thing they're doing here. This is a official partnership with Namco, so it's actually going to show up as published by Namco, but Hipster Whale did all the development. And it's a twist on Pac-Man where you have an endless Pac-Man maze, but the maze is being slowly eaten from one side by a glitch that is very cleverly resembles the kill screen at the end of Pac-Man. So the sort of glitchy letters that you would see on the screen if you reached the final stage of Pac-Man on the arcade machines. So you are going around eating Pac-Man pellets, and there are achievements and points to be gained based on how many you can eat and how much fruit you can eat and whether you can eat without stopping for X number of pellets, that sort of thing. But of course, there's power pellets. You can eat the ghosts, or otherwise you are pursued by the ghosts. But it's the twist in that it has this endless feel. It's you're going for a points high score. I have not really mastered this game yet, but just the few rounds of it that I've played, I have to say I think it's another hit. I think that Hipster Whale really has nailed it again. And mainly because, once again, they've really found a way to monetize a game, an iOS game, a free-to-play iOS game, without making it aggressively awful. This one's a little bit more on the edge than Crossy Road is. Crossy Road looks and feels like a premium game and never is so crass as to bring up price, except in those moments when you've decided that you love the game so much that you want to buy totally useless things in it to make it look cuter. You can buy the little different persons or, character models or what have you. This game, it monetizes with credits, like you'd put into an arcade machine. So each play costs a credit. You accrue credits through playing the game, and you can also accrue credits through a bunch of other means, including like watching an ad every now and then. But the game is so incredibly generous with credits, or at least it seems to be so far, that I mean, I again, like with Crossy Road, I cannot imagine how they are actually making money at it. It's a little less subtle about it here. You can see that there are credits. You can see how many credits you have. You know that eventually, if you wanted to keep playing, a game after game after game after game after game, you would probably need to, kick them a few bucks. But it's incredibly well done. So if you like Pac-Man and you want a good mobile version of it that does a really unique spin on it, I would definitely download it. Why not? It's free. There you are.
The only other thing is I took last week off between jobs, and so I played a couple kind of, quick tastes of a bunch of little games. I played another round of How to Full Boyfriend, the pigeon dating simulator.
You have to tell me about it.
Oh my gosh. Oh, wow. I have wanted to play that game. I spent a little while playing a game that I thought was similar called Food Court, that is a food dating simulator.
Are you playing the food, or do you work in the food court?
No, you are dating the food.
Okay.
Perfect.
The French fries were jerks to me, guys.
Oh, no.
The French fries came into a coffee shop and ordered a really complicated latte and got really mad when they didn't have it, and was just kind of an asshole. So I got really turned on.
Yeah. Did you try to date that French fry?
Yeah, we're gonna see each other again.
Shane likes bad boys or bad starches.
Ugh.
I like high calorie bad boys.
Yeah.
Keep that up for next week. Let us know how it's going with you and the French fry.
So how was Hatoful Boyfriend for you?
Delightful. So you're the only human going to a school for pigeons because the world has ended and you live in a cave. Like, you find this out slowly. Like, people are like, why are you tired? And you're like, oh, because it took me a long time to forage for berries last night. I haven't had meat in a week. And they're like, oh, that sucks being a human. They're not all pigeons. Sometimes they're things like rock doves.
Oh, of
The
course.
aristocratic boy that I was going after was definitely not your everyday pigeon. Although your best friend, kind of like Ducky and Pretty in Pink, is definitely just a standard pigeon.
Oh, yeah.
You can date him, but like, why would you?
Right. Yeah.
Why would you when there's much cooler? Like, you can date your teachers. I played it through twice. Once with Aristocrat, once with. I was trying to get. There's kind of a weird pigeon thing that's involved, like really into pudding. And apparently you can play it such that like sentient pudding is part of the game. And I was trying to get the sentient pudding ending and I failed.
Oh.
So I think I should try again until
That sounds worth
this
it.
game becomes even weirder.
Yeah, that really sounds worth it.
Oh, it's short. It's super short. If we want to cover it.
I guess I'm down for that once my relationship with the French fries has run its course.
Absolutely.
Don't break their hearts, Shane.
And I did play about 10 more minutes of Long Live the Queen until I remember I hate Excel spreadsheets, so why was I doing that to myself? If you like dying a lot, Long Live the Queen I can't recommend. It's entertaining, it's interesting, and then you're going to die horribly for a reason you cannot predict unless you keep track on a spreadsheet. So
yeah, it was too complicated for me, and I was really, really prepared to love that game. I love things that play on the dating sim model or the princess maker model. This is a little bit of a hobby horse for me. Why do we only ever get things that are deconstructing or recontextualizing the dating sim genre? Why don't we ever get any damn dating sims that are just dating sims?
Because they're sleazy.
No, they're not all sleazy. I would totally play a really legit, straightforward, decently produced, like decently written dating sim.
Well, what you're looking for is Dragon Age.
Regency Solitaire is supposed to have a pretty good dating sim in there.
Wait, really? I kept seeing that all over the internet, and all I understood about it was it's a solitaire game, and I don't really find that too interesting. Why are people tweeting about this? Is that what that's all about?
I haven't played it. I have picked it up, but I have not played it. I'm excited about it. It is basically that your rogue brother has a rake brother, excuse me, which is a proper nomenclature, has lost all the family's fortune by gambling, but you're good at gambling, so you can play lots of whist and or solitaire and earn money back. At the same time, it's a Jane Austen book, so you're also dating all the eligible bachelors in your town while you're trying to reclaim your family's fortune. So you're also, buying better dresses to go to the ball and whatnot.
That might make me overcome my my disinterest in playing solitaire. So I might give that a try.
Nothing could make me overcome my disinterest in playing solitaire.
And with that.
Sorry, I'm a hateful person.
That just killed the entire. It's like that was you taking, stepping on the switch and hitting us in our conversation with a brick. Love you, Shane.
I'm a jerk.
And with that, thank you guys for joining me on another episode of The Short Game. We doubled up this week so that we'd be able to get ahead of the ball a little bit with so many interesting games coming out right now. So we've got a lot of really interesting stuff coming up. If you have any feedback for us about this episode or any upcoming game that you think is interesting and might be right for the show, just drop us a line. We are at info@theshortgame.net, or we're on Twitter @_shortgame, or of course you can go to our website, www.theshortgame.net, where you can find a feedback form, a page where we list upcoming episodes as well as we are able, and all of our back episodes. We'd love to hear your feedback. You can also find me on Twitter. I'm @ReaganK. And Laura, where can people find you?
You can find me on Twitter @LauraJNash.
And Shane, where can people find you?
Find me @8BitShane.
And thanks so much for joining us on another episode of The Short Game.